It was a place of teeth and venom, where survival was measured in heartbeats. Yet against all reason, Cale, a boy of only 14 Terran years, found himself wandering those hostile marshes. It had not been bravery that brought him there, but recklessness. His father's survey ship had been charting the outer reaches of the system, mapping planets of little consequence. Cale, restless and eager to escape the monotony of endless star charts and regulations, had taken a scout skimmer for what he thought would be a harmless adventure. He dreamed of discovery, of finding something new, something no one else had seen. Instead, he found disaster. A sudden storm swept across the swamplands, ripping through the delicate sails of his skimmer. He fought to steer, but the winds tore the craft apart, throwing him into the reeds. Soaked, bruised, and terrified, Cale stumbled onto dry ground. Alone. No beacon. No comms, just the alien wilderness pressing close on all sides. For hours. He pushed through muck and thorns, calling out into the silence. His voice was swallowed by the swamp. The boy who had thought himself bold felt fear coil around him like a living thing. He was just a child in a place designed to devour the unprepared. And then he saw her. At first, Cale thought he had stumbled upon some strange statue. A figure stood half-hidden among jagged stones, silver skin glinting faintly under the dim light. But when he drew closer, he realized it was a girl young, not much older than himself. Her wrists were bound by heavy shackles, chains driven into the rock behind her. Her ankles were locked in place, and around her throat lay a crude iron collar. She was not human. Her features were sharp, elegant in a way Cale had never seen. Her hair shimmered with faint blue undertones, falling ragged over her shoulders. And her eyes, violet, luminous even in exhaustion, snapped to him the moment he moved. For a heartbeat. Boy and captive stared at one another. Cale's breath caught. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was wounded, her silvery skin marred by lash marks. Despite her youth, she held herself proudly, as if daring the world not to break her. Before Cale could speak, harsh voices echoed through the swamp. Shadows moved between the reeds raiders. Large reptilian figures, scaled hides glistening in the damp. Their eyes glowed a dull orange. They carried chains and cruel weapons. Their guttural speech was filled with mocking laughter as they approached the bound girl. Cale froze. Every instinct screamed at him to hide, to run. He was a child armed with nothing but a broken length of wood from the swamp floor. What chance did he have against monsters like them? And yet, when one of the raiders struck the girl across the face with the back of its claw, Cale felt something surge in his chest. Fear did not vanish, but it was drowned beneath anger, beneath a desperate conviction that he could not, would not, turn away. He attacked. With a cry that was more fear than courage, Cale charged, swinging the broken stave with all his strength. It cracked against the skull of one raider, stunning it. The others turned in shock, snarling, as the human boy scrambled to the girl's side. His hands fumbled at her restraints, his heart pounding like a drum. Claws raked his arm, drawing blood. He screamed, but did not stop. The collar lock was crude. He smashed it against the rock until it snapped. The girl seized the chain still dangling from her wrist. With terrifying speed, she whipped it around one raider's throat and yanked, the snap echoing in the swamp. Another lunged, only for her to swing the chain like a weapon, slashing its face. Cale staggered back, watching in awe. She was no helpless victim. She fought with ferocity, her movements graceful yet deadly. Together, an exhausted boy with a stave and a freed girl with a chain, they sent the raiders crashing into the mud. And then they ran. The swamp swallowed them, branches tearing at their clothes, water sucking at their boots. Behind them, furious shouts echoed, but the predators of Rinther had already descended upon the fallen raiders. Their pursuers did not follow. When dawn finally broke, Cale collapsed on a dry rise of land, his body trembling. The cut on his arm throbbed, fever beginning to set in. His vision blurred. The alien girl knelt beside him, pressing herbs into his wound. Her touch was firm, her expression unreadable. But when he looked at her, he saw something shift in her eyes, softness, gratitude, and perhaps the faintest smile. "Are too young for what you have done," she said in halting standard, her accent strange but clear. "But your courage has weight. You gave me freedom." Cale tried to speak, but his throat was dry. She placed a finger gently against his lips. He had been found barely conscious, lying among reeds near the wreckage of his skimmer. His wound was treated, his body fed and warmed. But when he tried to tell what had happened, of the chained girl with silver skin, the reptilian raiders, the desperate flight through the swamps, his father dismissed it as delirium. Hallucinations, the captain said, frowning as though Cale's words were a personal failing. The fever took your mind. Be grateful you're alive. Let this be a lesson in recklessness. The crew agreed. To them, Cale's tale was a boy's fantasy, born of pain and imagination. But Cale knew better. The memory of her eyes violet and unyielding burned too vividly to be a dream. Her voice, soft yet commanding, echoed in his mind whenever silence.
"Fel, you are too young. Return when you are older."
Those words became the cornerstone of his life. A promise takes root back on earth. Cale found himself restless. He could no longer be the boy who sought excitement without thought. The swamp had changed him. The girl's trust, however fleeting, had anchored something in his soul. At school, while others laughed and wasted hours, Cale studied. His teachers noted his sudden discipline, his relentless focus. He devoured languages, especially xenolinguistics, desperate to be prepared should he meet her kind again. He trained in survival courses, excelled in combat drills, and learned navigation until he could plot star routes in his sleep. When asked why he pushed himself so hard, Cale only smiled. Faintly. The truth that he was preparing to fulfill a promise to a girl most would swear didn't exist he kept to himself. Cadet to officer at 17, Cale entered the Terran Academy. From the first day, it was clear he was different. Where his peers treated drills as obstacles, Cale treated them as sacred duties. He sparred until his body ached, stayed up through the night mastering strategy, and memorized technical manuals others found dull. He earned respect, though not always friendship. To many cadets, Cale seemed distant, as though part of him lived elsewhere. Only one truly pierced that distance, Leon, a quick-witted cadet who matched Cale in skill but not in solemnity. "You act like you're chasing something," Leon once said during a midnight training exercise when the two lay side by side catching their breath. "Some ghost none of us can see." Cale hesitated, then answered quietly, "Not a ghost." "A promise." Leon laughed at first, thinking it a jest. But when he saw Cale's steady eyes, the laughter faded. "You mean it." "Stars above, you actually mean it." Cale nodded. He meant it with everything he was. The rise of a captain years flowed swiftly. At 20, Cale was assigned to the Outer Rim Patrol, where pirates, smugglers, and slavers prowled unchecked. He learned the reality of command, the weight of men's lives in his hands, the necessity of swift, sometimes brutal choices. At 22, after distinguished service, he was given his first independent command, a scout frigate named Resolute. It was small, fast, lightly armed, but to Cale, it was the first step toward the destiny that had haunted him since boyhood. Each assignment rescuing colonists, chasing raiders, securing trade lanes was done with precision and resolve. Yet no matter the mission, one thought lingered always in the back of his mind. Rinther, the swamp world. The girl with violet eyes. Who was she? Why had she been captured? Did she even survive the years that had passed? He did not know. But he had promised. The eve of his decision, on the night of his 25th birthday, Cale stood in the courtyard of the old academy on Earth. The stars stretched above him, endless and cold. The laughter of young cadets drifted faintly from the mess hall nearby. He felt both a part of it and apart from it, a man carrying a secret weight none of them could understand. Leon found him there, leaning against the stone railing. "You've been different lately," his friend said. "Distant. Don't tell me you're still chasing that story from when you were a kid." Cale's jaw tightened. It wasn't a story. Leon sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Cale, it's been over a decade. People don't survive that long in chains on a death world. If she even existed, she's gone by now." Cale looked up at the stars, his voice quiet but steady. "She told me to return when I was older. I am older now. I can't break that promise." Leon studied him for a long moment, then shook his head with a rueful smile. "You're insane. But you're my brother, and I'll follow you to the edge of the galaxy if that's where this madness takes you." For the first time in years, Cale allowed himself a small smile. As Resolute descended through the thick violet clouds of Rinther, Cale felt a chill creep across his skin. 14 years had passed since he had last walked this mire, yet the air was the same heavy, damp, alive with an alien hostility. The sight of endless reed forests stretching into the horizon, their roots tangled in black waters, pulled him back to that day as a boy when he had stumbled terrified among them. But Cale was not that boy anymore. He stood now as a captain, his uniform crisp, his eyes steady. His hand rested on the hilt of a sidearm, not a broken stave. He had come prepared. The ship's scanners told him what he had half expected. The raiders were still here. Over the years, their camps had grown into sprawling strongholds. Shanty fortresses of rusted metal and stone squatted above the swamps, guarded by watchtowers and skimmer patrols. Trade beacons pulsed with coded signals, proof that the slavers had turned Tar into a hub for their vile business. "Looks like a nest of carrion eaters," muttered Lieutenant Vera, his second in command, studying the tactical display. "Why waste time here, Captain? Command didn't send us to break slaver rings." Cale's gaze never left the screen. "This isn't about command. This is about a promise." The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Most had heard the stories, the legend of how their captain, as a boy, had rescued a chained girl in these very swamps. Some believed it. Others dismissed it as the sort of myth officers wrapped themselves in. But none doubted Cale's resolve. If he said they were here for a reason, that was enough. The first signs, Cale led a hand-picked squad into the swamps aboard a drop shuttle. They moved silently, the mists curling around them, every ripple in the water setting nerves on edge. Cale's memory of the place was uncanny. Though years had passed, he seemed to know where to step, which ridges would hold weight, where the ground would sink beneath false firmness. He guided them unerringly, deeper and deeper, until even the seasoned soldiers whispered uneasily. Then they found the trail. A column of chained figures trudged through the muck, pushed along by scaled raider guards. Men, women, and children of various species, all bound, all broken. Cale's chest tightened, but he kept his composure, eyes scanning every face. Then he saw her. She was older now, no longer the fragile youth he remembered. Her silver skin had lost none of its strange glow, and though her frame bore scars of hardship, she carried herself with unbroken dignity. Her violet eyes burned with the same defiance he had first seen so long ago. For an instant, she froze mid-step, her gaze snapping to him. Recognition flared. Cale's breath caught. After all these years, she was alive. The battle the raiders noticed the Terran squad a heartbeat later. Snarls erupted, weapons raised. "Take them." Cale's command rang out sharp and unflinching, Blaster fire split the swamp's gloom. Plasma bolts hissed against water, vapor rising in choking clouds. Kale moved like a man possessed each. Shot precise, each order swift. His squad cut through the guards, overwhelming them with disciplined ferocity. In the chaos, Kale forced his way toward the chained prisoners. He fired a burst into a raider's chest, kicked another sprawling into the mud, and reached her. Up close, she was more striking than memory allowed. Older, yes, hardened, but her presence filled the air around her. She stood still, watching him with wide eyes, as if unwilling to believe. He smashed the lock binding her wrists. The chain clattered into the mire. "You," she began, her voice trembling. "I promised," Kale answered simply. For the first time, a true smile crossed her face. After the fight, when the last raider fell, the swamp grew silent save for the ragged breaths of freed prisoners. The Terran squad began cutting chains, tending to wounds, organizing the captives. Kale stood a few paces from her, uncertain for the first time in years. He had dreamed of this moment, envisioned it 100 ways. Yet standing before her, reality was heavier, sharper, more fragile than any fantasy. She stepped closer, studying him. "You are different," she said softly. "Not the boy who stumbled from the reeds." Kale inclined his head. "No, I'm not a boy anymore." Her eyes softened, though sadness lingered there too. "And yet you remembered. After all this time, I never forgot." For a long moment, they simply stared at one another, a gulf of 14 years bridged by memory and promise. Around them, chaos continued, prisoners weeping, soldiers shouting, swamp creatures stirring, but for Kale and the silver-skinned woman, the world seemed to fall away. The girl he had once freed was now a woman standing before him. She had survived. And he had come back, just as he swore he would. The rescued captives filled the cargo holds, recovering from years of slavery. Kale's crew, hardened soldiers accustomed to frontier patrols, found themselves quietly moved by their plight. Medical teams worked without pause, and soldiers donated their rations to the weakest prisoners. Among the freed, one figure drew every gaze: Sira, the silver-skinned woman who had once been the girl Kale had saved. Her presence was undeniable. Though she had endured years of captivity, she carried herself with a dignity that turned heads. Her violet eyes were sharp, her bearing regal even in exhaustion. She was not merely a survivor, she was a leader. Kale saw it from the first moment. When the prisoners huddled in fear, it was Sira who steadied them, speaking in her native tongue with a calm authority. When despair crept into their voices, it was she who reminded them they were free, who urged them to stand again. The crew whispered that she was more than she appeared. To Kale, there was no question. This was not chance, it was destiny. Conversations in the quiet one evening, after the chaos of resettling the captives had settled into routine, Kale found her standing before the viewport of Resolute's observation deck. Beyond the glass stretched a sea of stars, distant and cold. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glow. "You remember the swamp," she said without turning. Kale stepped beside her. "I've remembered every day." Her lips curved into something between a smile and a sigh. "I did not think you would return. You're kind, humans, you are quick to act, quick to burn bright. But memories fade, promises fade faster. Not mine." His voice was firm, almost defiant. At that, she turned to face him. For the first time, she studied him not as a stranger, but as the boy she had once known. "You were a child with fire in your eyes. Now you stand before me a man who commands soldiers. You carry weight, Kale, heavier than most your age." He met her gaze evenly. "Because I built my life on that promise. On you, for a moment." Silence stretched. Then she looked away, her tone quieter. "You should know my people, the Velari. We were once many, scattered across worlds. Long ago, wars broke us. Raiders found profit in our weakness. For generations, they hunted us. To them, we are a commodity, not a people. Her voice trembled with restrained fury. I have been captured more times than I can count. Freed, hunted, chained again. Yet I never forgot who I am. Cale felt. His chest tightened. He wanted to reach for her hand but held himself still. And now you are free. You're not alone anymore. This time, she did not deny him a smile. The crew's perception in the days that followed, Cale and Syrah became inseparable. She joined him at briefings, translating the stories of other Villari captives, piecing together the scattered remnants of her people. She walked the corridors with quiet strength, and the crew began to respect her as much as their captain, Vera. Muttered to Cale in private, "She's not just a survivor, Captain. She's a banner. These people would follow her anywhere." Cale only nodded. "Then let's give them a cause worth following." From survival to defiance, with Resolute as their base, Cale began striking back at the slaver rings. The Villari, guided by Syrah, volunteered eagerly. Many were weak from years of captivity, but they fought with desperation and pride. Cale's disciplined soldiers and Syrah's newly freed kin formed an unlikely but formidable alliance. Together, they raided supply convoys, dismantled camps, and freed more captives. The name of Resolute spread like wildfire among the outer systems. It was not long before whispers began. The promised captain. The human who returned for the silver-eyed woman. The ship that carries freedom on its hull. Cale pretended not to care for the stories. But late at night, when exhaustion pressed heavy, he thought of that swamp years ago and realized the galaxy was beginning to see what he had always known, that she was worth remembering, worth fighting for. An unspoken bond one night after a particularly brutal raid that freed dozens of Villari, Cale found himself in the mess hall with Syrah. The crew had left them alone, perhaps deliberately. "You've changed everything," he told her quietly. "The crew follows you. Your people are rallying. Without you, she interrupted gently, "I would still be in chains." Their eyes met. The silence between them was not empty, it was heavy with unspoken truths. Respect had become companionship. Companionship had become something deeper, though neither dared give it voice yet. Syrah's smile was faint but sure. "Humans, your kind carries strange strength. You remember promises as though they are oaths written in the stars themselves." "To me," Cale said, his voice steady, "they are the beginning of something greater." By the time the Resolute completed its third campaign against the slavers, it was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol. The Villari survivors rallied to its call. Colonies whispered of its victories. And at the center of it all stood Cale and Syrah, two lives bound by a promise made in the mists of Rinther. The bond between them was more than friendship, more than duty. It was the foundation of a future neither had imagined as children. The Atrani outpost had never seen such a sight. Hundreds of soldiers stood in tense silence, plasma rifles raised, as the tall figure of a human man stepped forward. His stride was calm, his expression steady, and though the years had hardened his frame, there was a familiarity in his movements that made Vera's heart falter. The crowd seemed to part for him unconsciously, as though even without command they understood something monumental was about to unfold. Vera, her ceremonial armor catching the pale light of the Atrani moons, walked forward to meet him. When their eyes locked, time seemed to collapse. The years of waiting, the ache of distance, the endless wondering, all of it fused into this. "One moment, Marcus," she whispered, the name foreign yet warm on her tongue. He bowed slightly, the gesture more disciplined now, polished by years of military service. "I told you I'd come back." The soldiers muttered in confusion. To them, this was an anomaly, a human standing unflinching before an armed company, speaking not with fear but with quiet authority. Some recognized the tone, not of a boy, not even of a mere soldier, but of someone carrying unshakable purpose. Vera's chest tightened. He had grown taller, his voice deeper, his face marked with the sharpness of adulthood. And yet, behind his eyes, she could still see the boy who had risked everything for her in the cave so long ago. The Atrani commander stepped forward, frowning. "Who is this? Why does he walk among us unarmed?" Marcus glanced at him but did not answer immediately. Instead, his gaze remained fixed on Vera as though seeking permission. Her nod was subtle but enough. "I am Marcus Hale of Earth," he said finally, his voice carrying across the assembly. "Years ago, when Atrani patrols hunted her, I stood in their way. She told me to return when I was older. I have kept that promise." A ripple spread through the soldiers. Some scoffed. Others stared with disbelief. The commander looked unimpressed. "Childish games. You claim a bond with Lady Vera, heir of the Atrani line? Impossible." Marcus's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then ask her yourself." Vera stepped forward, her presence silencing even the most doubtful. Her eyes burned like twin stars as she turned to face her people. "He speaks the truth. The human boy saved my life. Without him, your heir would have perished in a forgotten cave. He stood where none of you did. And I," her voice caught briefly before steadying, "I have waited for this moment ever since." The revelation struck the soldiers like a thunderclap. The commander opened his mouth to argue, but Vera raised her hand, silencing him. Marcus, meanwhile, simply looked at her. His heart pounded, not from fear of the crowd or the weapons still pointed his way, but from the weight of years pressing into this single reunion. "I came because I couldn't forget. I don't think I ever could." Her composure finally cracked, if only for a moment. Her lips trembled, then curved into a smile both fierce and vulnerable. "Neither could I." For a breathless instant, the galaxy seemed to pause. The two stood together, no longer a boy and a girl separated by circumstance, but two beings who had defied time, duty, and distance to meet again. Around them, whispers grew, some voices in awe, others in resistance, but it no longer mattered. Marcus took another step forward until he stood before her, close enough to see the faint scars on her cheek, reminders of battles fought in his absence. Slowly, deliberately, he extended his hand. The Atrani gasped. Such gestures were intimate, sacred, not performed before an army. But Vera did not hesitate. She reached out, her clawed fingers curling around his human hand, the contrast striking and beautiful. "I waited," she said softly, "and you came." "I promised," he replied, his voice steady with conviction. In that moment, something shifted, not just between them, but in the eyes of the Atrani soldiers who bore witness. They saw a truth undeniable. A human had crossed the gulf of years and cultures, not for conquest or gain, but for loyalty, for memory, for something their own legends rarely touched upon: love forged in defiance.